Merager has been a member since August of 2016, and after many years in the corporate life, leading teams to produce high-quality financial and IT results, Steve realized that his calling was to help move smaller companies to a much higher operational level by working with them directly. He's thrilled to introduce highly effective concepts and practices to these rising companies and give them a unique competitive edge. His specialties are strategic planning, finance project management, presentations to senior staff, finance managing, cash flow analysis, budget negotiations, and the list goes on. Steve.
Go on, please. Sounds pretty awesome. Morning. Pricing is a really interesting thing to me, and hopefully at the end of this you'll agree with me. We see prices all over the place. We see them in a sandwich store. We see them when we're buying a car. We're seeing them when we are getting professional services. And every time we see them, typically, unless we look at them, you'll think, yeah, okay. You'll go through your mind and you'll do all kinds of calculations that we'll talk about. So those prices aren't necessarily the correct ones. And you may walk away from something simply because you've gone through all of these calculations, all these things you might think about, to come to a decision of whether you're going to purchase it or not. You know, as consumers, we make emotional choices, and so much of them it feels intuitive, but you know, so much of it is where we are in the world at that exact moment. You know, if things were going wonderfully, you know, you might buy a $100 bottle of champagne, but if maybe there was something else going on, you would think, this is insane, why would I do this? And so we sort of feel prices. We have a sense of our safety in the world, where we are, if it makes sense, the long term, if it makes sense as well. And then we'll talk about also how the price sounds. So there's all kinds of these effects that we have. This is a great one. You know, you go down a cereal aisle, and you'll see Cocoa Puffs, and you'll also see whatever the store-bought version is. And if they're exactly the same, you know, you're going to have a lot of questions about it. You know, so when you have a situation like this, you want to differentiate. You want to get to the point where people can see that your product is different, that it has different characteristics, just to stand out in the crowd. We also have difficult comparison effect. Now I did Tums and this name brand to show you that these two products, they're both calcium carbonate. They're chalk. And Tums has been in business for a long time. And people have a sense that since Tums has been around, that it's better. But it's not. It's exactly the same thing. Calcium carbonate, which is most of what these are. It's going to give you the same effect. So consumers will pay a higher price for established products, and one of the ways to get past that, if you're not the established product, is a lot of marketing. It's a continuous message of we're better. And you know, we have a political atmosphere right now where people just say that, and they keep saying that, and they keep saying that. And it's actually, if we look at the news, it's really effective. You keep saying the same thing, people start to believe it, especially if the message is heard more often than the competitor. And so we want to make it more compelling, somehow, and whatever that is, that our service is better than the competition. We want to be honest about that, I believe, but you know, we, it's what the consumer hears. And we want to get to the place where we're not, if possible, that we're not in the competition's market. And Woolite did that very well back in the 50s. There were detergents out there, whatever the detergents were, and they were for just washing clothes. And Woolite came along, and they took themselves completely out of the detergent market, and they made themselves as an alternative to dry cleaning. And so they made themselves a completely new market, and they were able to set their own price lower than the dry cleaners, but far greater than the detergents. So they were alone in the marketplace simply because, and whether it's true or not that they were an alternative to dry cleaning is another matter altogether. But they were really successful with that for quite some time. Now they're not quite as, they don't have quite that price differential, but it is still there. Yeah, the switching cost effect. I put there's the lawn service. So the switching cost for a lawn service would be less than for professional services. But the idea is, if the cost to switch is high, that the customer is not going to be as sensitive to a higher price. If the risk to them is going to be less with a higher price, they're willing to pay that. And switching costs there's so many for companies. There's fear. There's fear that if they change vendors, for instance, that they are going to lose time, that their employees aren't going to know how to use the new system. There might be switching costs themselves with their vendor to get out of the contract. So, and there's a few others, but so one of the ways to do this, so you can still charge a higher cost than maybe your competitor, if you do things such as preemptively get them to understand that they're going to be safe after they're going to be safer even, would be better, after they make the switch. That you're going to take care of all of the technical things first. That they are going to be trained. It may reduce the operational costs. There's so many of those things, but if we go ahead beforehand and go through everything and explain to them how they will be at least as safe afterwards as before, and then they're going to be a lot better for it. And again, the higher cost isn't the most important. The money, the monetary cost, isn't necessarily their most pressing concern at that point. Yeah, so this is another really interesting one, and we've all seen this, the price quality effect, where a company will set a price, and however you feel about Apple, there might probably some hardcore Apple people in here that might push against this, but objectively, there's some computer folks in here that might agree or disagree, but Apple products are absolutely fantastic. They started right from the beginning. They established themselves as a premium product. They have done the aesthetics. They've done all the marketing. They've made themselves into the perception that they are a special product. And since they're a special product, then it would only make sense to pay a higher price. The higher price, so if they didn't set a higher price, if they set a commodity price, people would have a perception of, they don't really believe that it's a special product. And so it wouldn't have that cachet, it wouldn't have that sensibility of this, of course, is a special product. You're going to be an elite spending that extra 50, 75, 100% more than a commodity PC. So they have done an absolutely fantastic job of this. Starbucks is another, another example of that, where Starbucks is coffee. We've all had a cup of coffee. We've all had some amazing cups of coffee, but they absolutely set themselves and they were one of the first really in the market of premium coffee, of premium experience for coffee. And so they set themselves up as the first ones to do that. And when you're first, and Apple did it as well, they did it as a premium computer, you're able to get yourself in front of all of the other competition that's going to do that. And then it's very difficult for other competitors afterwards to also say that, because now you're that reference. So so they marketed to the specialists. They moved it into the need category, and that was another of course brilliant thing that Apple did. Of course you have to have this. They had the messaging that this was for artists, and so of course you have to have it. And of course they did that, Apple did it with the iPod and all these other product categories. Scarcity, you have to go to the Apple Store or Apple Online. They do not have resellers, which is incredibly important because they absolutely set the price. Once they set the price, no matter where you go, you pay the exact same price. So there's no way that somebody could come in, reduce the price, and therefore reduce the perception of specialness. So some of these, you'll once said, it makes sense, right? So if a buyer, if the purchase is a huge part of a person's budget, income, whatever you might want to call it, they're going to be less likely to buy, which of course makes sense. So a way to get around that is to, first of all, we want to identify the qualified buyers. We want to, before they get too far into the process, we want to make sure that, especially, maybe a high-end car. And of course, car dealerships do that after the test drive. So they do that pretty quickly. But then also what you can do is maybe they can't pay cash for it, but you can create a loan program that allows them to do that. GM actually, they created their loan company was one of their biggest money makers by far, and it wasn't selling cars. Yes.
I just want to let you know you're 10 minutes.
Is it really? Okay.
And if you want to look at a few questions or however you want to use the last.
Okay. So if a packaged offer is deemed too expensive, people think of the components as too expensive, and they will have an even greater resistance to higher priced components. So what we want to do is create 3 product packages where a low, middle, and high-end, luxury end. People will typically go to the middle option, but then you give them the option of the low-end option as well. And we want to be a trusted partner so that they understand the cost, the value of the components. Shared cost effect, if the buyer is paying only a portion of the cost, they'll be more okay with a higher price. That happens with business class seats. It happens with people that use coupons. They're not paying as much as they would before, so that higher price is okay with them. And then again, we can create a loan program. I think this is the last one. The fairness effect, there's a sensibility of what's fair in what context. This is an airport cafe food court. People will pay $10 for a tuna sandwich, $12 for a tuna sandwich, where otherwise they would only pay $6 or $7. But in that context, they feel okay. And same thing with a beer at a baseball game, whatever it might be. $8 for a beer, $10 for beer, whatever it is. People say, okay, I'll just have one. And so it's all about what the context of your offering. And so the framing effect, people, the way a product is framed, whether it's good or bad, people will accept it to a great degree. And again, we have this idea of creating 3 product bundles, the low end, the middle, and the luxury. And then, I think that's it. So yeah, that's it. So, sorry, now you're thrilled about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
Is that kind of what you do with your business then? You present to whoever that I can do this for you?
It is. This is just one of those pieces of that businesses have where they're going along, they're doing all kinds of things, and they're not able to see one of these sort of nuances in their business. If I change this, if I offered it in this way, if I framed it in this way, if I used the psychology to help the consumer make that purchase and be happy with the purchase, we should do that as business owners so that they are leaning in towards our businesses and accepting what we have as the correct thing for them to use, the correct service or product or whatever it might be that they should use. Any other questions? Did I
It's
stop?
not really a question. I mentioned to you earlier, I've got a client who's got, like one product, they've got 47 price levels for it, right? So it seems to me that is a sales-driven process. Sales guy goes out, he's trying to make the sale, I'll give you a special deal. And that is completely different from what you're talking about here. It's more of a methodical marketing standpoint where you really strategically think about pricing. Would that be fair to say that?
It's like so many things that are so helpful to us if we talk about them beforehand. If there is a product line, there should be a conversation of this is what we're going to offer. And the salespeople move them towards one of those offers, one of those price points, whatever it is. It almost feels like the salespeople are attempting to have the customer feel like they're special. You got this special deal. And of course they are special. And they can have the special offer that is established. And they can be made to feel really good about it. So, we can use pricing to bring other...
I guess a question in there maybe, as you're talking, is that maybe if it's a very commodity-based product, you have to do some of that. Whereas if you're trying to really set yourself aside, do some strategic things about who you are to differentiate, that might be, so it might just be different, right? Pricing?
Well, commodities typically have a very low profit margin. That's one of the hallmarks of a commodity. And they can change. The price of wheat will change on a very regular basis. It's relatively volatile. But some of these things, and I'm not sure what you're talking about, but software, it'll have a relatively solid, stable price, and you can create packages, and so there are other ways to bring people along other than just microscopic changes in price. It typically won't bring psychological changes that some of these others, using these others in combination, would be helpful. And so using these different pricing methodologies in combination with each other is the most powerful way to affect that.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much.